Hi, everybody at TDF. I'm Krysta Rodriguez.
And I'm Erik Jensen.
We are from the collaboration that is playing right now on Broadway at the Samuel J. Friedman Theater through February 5th. We just got our extension, which is very exciting. I play Maya, who is sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of girlfriends of Basquiat, who kind of comes in and changes the direction of the show. And Erik, what do you do in the collaboration?
Well, I have the great privilege and responsibility of playing Bruno Bischofberger, the Swiss art dealer and collector who introduced Jean-Michel Basquiat and Warhol together, and sort of helped come up with the idea of them collaborating together, which is what the play
Yes.
is about.
Yes. You're the inciting incident.
I
And
am the inciting incident.
I am the what complication.
Right. Let's describe ourselves for people who have some vision issues, maybe. Do
Yes.
you want to do that first?
Sure. Well, I am what someone might call high contrast. I have very light skin and very dark hair. It's the Spaniard in me. And I'm sitting in my living room, my beloved living room. I have a fireplace, a white brick fireplace behind me, and some of my most treasured possessions on the mantle. I have some books and a stacked up with a vase and what I call dingo balls, which is
Wow.
which are, I don't know why. I don't know what the name of the plant is, but they have little like susicle balls on them. And I have a mirror and a framed, I'm trying to move I'm like the opposite direction. I have a framed menu from a restaurant that I thought was so beautiful. They wrote it down so pretty, and so I framed it, and that's up in my living room. What about you, Erik?
Well, I'm in my writing office right now, which has got a Commedia mask from when I used to do Commedia dell'arte plays, and it's got a couple of lava lamps behind me,
Of course.
my Grateful Dead poster from the 50th anniversary concerts, and a couple of my nicer guitars hanging up in the background, one that my cousin made for me. And I'm Caucasian, and I have a beard, and I'm losing my hair, and that's why I'm wearing a hat.
Okay, we have some questions. All right, were you Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat fans before being cast in the collaboration? And who are the visual artists who have inspired you? I can take this. I was a fan of them. I wasn't a knowledgeable fan, and I was more in tune with Warhol because 2 years ago now, I played Liza Minnelli in the Netflix series Halston, which was very much focused on that era where Warhol was coming in, and he was part of that group. And Interview Magazine was a mainstay in their in that sort of friend group. And so, Althea is making her voice
in the room.
known.
Sorry she interrupted you. Please continue.
No, please. No apologies, Erik. So I knew a little bit about him more than I did Basquiat. But now that I've become, a groupie of Basquiat as his girlfriend, I've learned so much more, and I've really gotten deep into really what they were both saying about their moment in culture and their moment in history, and how what our play explores is how similar they are, even how different they are, really, how similar they are. And that similarity comes from them being sort of the revolutionaries of their time, and how differently those times spoke to each other. I think, like, to only be 2 decades or so later to need such a different revolution is really fascinating. What about you?
It's all about, the play is essentially a love story, I think, between the two painters. And, there's a new generation of documentary theater artists coming up from underneath me who are meant to usurp me. And,
Right.
and that's the cycle that we're in as artists. There's always some fresh ideas coming from somewhere, from younger people, and it either pushes you or it destroys you. And that's kind of one of the big questions of the play. I was a big fan of both artists because my uncle Walter, who was an illustrator and a visual artist, my great uncle Walter, He did Western art, but he would take me to the Walker Museum and the museums in Minneapolis a lot, and he would explain all the art to me. And we spent less time on the Warhol than anything else. I think as an illustrator, he really had an anti-Warhol thing going. But I love to linger at the Warhols. And of course, I just saw the recent exhibit here in New York of King Pleasure that the Basquiat family put together, where they recreated his studio and put up a bunch of his paintings. And that was my main piece of research on Basquiat this time around. I was completely enthralled by spending time in that museum. So
I think it's over. Is it over, or
it just ended? Yeah.
Shoot, I missed it. I
was a cartoonist when I first moved to New York City. I was a cartoonist for High Times magazine. So, obviously you get influenced by everybody you see, but I was influenced by a lot of comic book guys, which is the wonderful thing about being in a play with an Avenger, is that all of my comic geekdom dreams are coming true. So I was a big Jack Kirby fan and a big Art Spiegelman fan and a big Robert Crumb fan. So those are my influences mostly.
Oh, I didn't realize that you did cartoonism.
I had to make money somehow.
Sure. Everyone does, but not everyone can be a cartoonist. I can't draw. I'm a stick figures at the
right
max. Right
on.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll trade drawings.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Well, yours will look as you can imagine it right now. It will be a stick figure. I don't really like, I've been in New York for so long, and I love going to the museums, and but like one of the things I love about the museum is the architecture.
Oh, you're a designer.
Right. My passion is in design. And so I like, if I'm in a museum where there's like a furniture exhibit or like a pottery exhibit, get out of here. That's what I'm looking at. I'm just like so inspired by that. Or I'm looking at the building. I'm taking in the sanctity of the space and the acoustics and the way that like everything sort of like there's nothing like going into the Guggenheim and just being led in an experience, that's the epitome of curation, I think. And that the building is so freaking cool to look at. So those are the people that inspire me, are the architectures and
that would be architects. And you could try again. You want to take another shot at it? Architect?
No, architects. Architecturists.
There we go.
Who do all of those things, so that's kind of my jam more than visual art.
Well, we spent a lot of time in the dressing rooms when we're both done off stage talking about architecture and art and design. And you're working on your house right now. So I used to, when I was making a living doing other things, I used to paint houses and stuff. So we've had very interesting conversations about design.
You also do stop motion now. You've become a stop motion artist.
Along with my friend Rachel McIntosh, we created a little stop motion film for our New Year's card for the cast and crew of the collaboration, and I had to keep a secret for like 6 weeks, which was really hard.
I know. And you started to like leak it a little bit, talking about how you were working with your friend on something stop motion, and how all of a sudden when it came out, we're like, oh, this is what you've been doing. It's so cool. We still have to post it. It's so cool. We all have little 3D printed versions of ourselves. And it's like, it's so creative and so neat. So you're an artist that I admire.
Thank you. You're an artist that I admire too. And when we get to the casting part at the end of this thing, I've got amazing ideas to cast you.
Okay. Oh gosh. Right. Oh gosh. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Erik. You take this one.
What did you learn about Warhol and Basquiat from doing this play that you didn't know before? Krysta, you want to answer that first, or do you?
I mean, I think I learned almost everything that I didn't know before. I think I sort of knew-ish that they worked together because you see all the photos of them. That's a real, like, they're an iconic, there's that Instagram site page, Pop Art Trio, which is basically about Warhol, Basquiat, and Keith Haring. And so, if you're aware of that era at all, you see their iconography, but I didn't know to the extent of their friendship, the extent of their and the work that they created. I hadn't seen any of that work before. So I was really coming into this completely fresh as to what it was. And while people, it's so interesting. People come to see the show and afterwards they go, so was that real? Did they know each other? And I'm so shocked. Of course, I would have felt the same way maybe had I gone in to see the show without researching it at all. But now that I know, I feel what an interesting experience it would be to watch the show and think that we entirely made up the whole thing, like that it's entire fan fiction or something, that what if these two people were in the same room together?
Right.
But
What
it's
if
not. They were deeply connected. They were very good friends. They were, fully trusting collaborators. Things, changed and morphed throughout time, but these pieces were real. What they did was real. Their friendship was real, and their collaboration was real. And I'm so honored to now know more about it. But I also learned so much about Basquiat from this book I keep talking about, Widow Basquiat, which was Suzanne Maluk, the story of Suzanne Maluk, who was one of the primary relationships in Basquiat's life. And just what that whole thing was like. And I think a lot about, we did a talk back the other day, and somebody asked about, like, does fame kill? And I just think so much about these artists and how it's a tragedy that they don't continue what they're doing for one reason or another. Their work doesn't, they pass before, they can create more work. But there is something about an artist that gives it all. We have so many examples of that, and for better or for worse, it changes the landscape of what everybody does when somebody is so concentrated in their contribution to the world. And, like, I don't mean to glorify it, but I'm also very grateful that even for a short amount of time that those people can exist. And there's so many of them, that we have. So it's, I don't know, I've just been really inspired by learning how much he gave, Basquiat in particular, gave to this art form, and what he wanted to do with it, and how hell-bent he was, and how there are people who are just artists. They just can't exist as anything else. They can't exist in the world that we've created. They have to exist in this world, and that's often lethal, And I've learned a lot about what that is like to just live and die for the art, and that's it.
Well, we all are sacrificing our bodies for the betterment of humanity, and sometimes our minds. I learned that Basquiat was influenced by more than just sort of early hip hop and graffiti culture, that he was influenced by a lot of different writers and books and classical painters. And my assumptions about Basquiat really got blown out of the water, especially because Jeremy Pope gives such a remarkable performance.
Yeah.
As far as Warhol goes, my experience of Warhol was, my friend Mary Herron directed I Shot Andy Warhol. So I've been hanging out with her a lot because she's helping us put a movie together. But the movie that I wrote with my wife is about Lester Bangs, and it takes place in '82 in New York. So 80s New York is of great interest to me, because of all the creatures and people and artists who surrounded that whole scene. The Velvet Underground and Lou Reed are a very important band to me. So having Lou's name even mentioned in the play is just thrilling to me.
Yeah.
So mostly, like, I come to Warhol through music. But I lived in Pittsburgh, so I lived for school. So I lived near the Warhol Museum, and that's where I learned a lot about Warhol too.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I've been to that museum. It's
Have
good.
you? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun, right?
It is fun. Oh gosh.
Oh, here comes one. You do this one. You do this one.
Due to a COVID outbreak, the show did not go on your opening night. What did you do instead?
Oh,
What a night that was.
I just remember you coming down to my room and your hair was in curlers up
Yes.
over your head, and you were like, "What are we gonna do?" Like, what the hell? What just happened?
Nothing has ever, like, that just is unprecedented in my life, and, like, you would think we'd be used to unprecedented at this point, but it's just like, what are you talking about? So I had so I'm the only female in this show, and so we were gonna have to do press right after the performance, and I knew I was gonna want to take an hour and a half to get ready to go, and you guys were all gonna be ready in 5 seconds.
Right, totally.
And So I had hired my hair and makeup person to come before the show to get me like partially ready, so that I could have like, because a lot of the look that I was going for the party and for the press afterwards was similar to what I am in the show, just sort of
Right
a more
on.
glamorous version. So she was going to sort of get me ready so that when the show was over, she could just do like touch-ups, get me, you know, rather than have to take off my show makeup and put on regular makeup or whatever. So she was there in the room with me,
Oh, I didn't
and
know that.
that's why I had the curlers in, because she was getting my hair ready. And she had come early and we were almost ready. And we kept being like, because, you know, at half hour, anybody who's not a part of the production has to leave. That's like, you're not allowed to be backstage after half hour. That's always been how it is. But they hadn't called half hour yet.
Yep.
So we kept saying like, okay, good. We're getting, because openings always start late. So we were like, okay,
Right.
good. They're late. Everyone's opening their cards and their gifts and their flowers and all this stuff. And so when she, they weren't calling it, we were like, okay, good. And then James came in, our stage manager, and he was like, well, keep doing your hair for the party, but we're not doing a show tonight. And
Wow.
I was like, what? Are you serious? He goes, yeah. I said, who has COVID? And he told us who it was. I'm not sure if we're allowed to talk about it.
I think, yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably better not to.
Yeah. And so, so it was just sort of like, oh man, I couldn't even believe it. And then all of a sudden I'm getting texts because all of my friends were in the house. They were seated, ready for the show. What happened? Are you okay? What's going on? What do we do? And I just didn't know. And what was so funny was like, you know, this is my 9th Broadway show, and I have, and you know, many openings around that. But I've gotten like to be a pro at the opening. Even me like calculating, like I'm going to get ready a little bit before and then have a little bit after, is me knowing how these things work.
Well, you know the rhythm of it. Yeah, totally.
I know the rhythm of it.
I learned,
And
by the
so,
way, I learned so much from you just with our little talks in the room. I mean, this is my debut, so I'm learning so much about Broadway and the business, and you're one of my teachers this year, and I really appreciate it.
Well, that's very sweet. It's the same, but also I know nothing. That obviously this COVID world is taking me out. So I showed up. So normally you don't want to show up in like an outfit and then change into your outfit, you know, and you don't want to bring a purse because then you'll forget all your things when you're out because you want to get your cute purse. So I came to the theater in sweatpants and a paper bag that had like my ID and my keys, you know, and my phone. Like I was like, only the bare necessities. And within 15 minutes, I'm like, do we leave? Like, I don't even know. Do we go home? Are we allowed to go home? You don't leave the theater ever. Like, it just felt like I got in a lifeboat or something and everything else was going down. I don't know. And like, I got to see you, but I didn't even really see anybody else. It just sort of, everyone dispersed and it was mayhem. And so I left the theater just like holding my little paper bag and my sweatpants. And all my friends went across the street to Glass House and we got a big table and we had dinner. And I was so emotional. I was like up on this like roller coaster. I kept going to my friends being like, you guys look so nice. You all look really nice. I was like really moved by how cute they looked and how dressed up they got. And anyway, it ended up being very fun because we had this big like family style dinner and everybody, normally at those parties, you're lucky if you see your friends and stuff.
Sure.
But like, I really got to spend time with them, but it was still very sad. And every once in a while I'd be having fun and then I'd get this wave of like loss, you know, and then we shut down the show for 6 days. So then it was really, I've never gone through that. I've never been a part of a show that didn't perform, you know, like the show always goes on and it just didn't.
Well, and we're such a tight ensemble too. You know, everybody was dealing with their individual disappointment in their own ways, but we kept our text chain going. Like, you know, we have a little text chain between us that goes on and on. I got invited to go to the party and I just couldn't. I was just like, it was
going to the party didn't seem.
It didn't seem right.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, like, what if I got COVID at the party? So my family went home and my daughter and I watched Marvel movies. So I was sort of with Paul.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. What was that feeling? I mean, like part of the reason that I wanted to do the show was to have another opening night for you. This was your Broadway debut. Like, what do you, one thing like one of the famous stories about Jeremy is that when he did MTC, his opening night at Choir Boy, his mom fainted.
Right.
you know? And so that was his Broadway debut. It got
Uh-huh.
kind of like thwarted. My Broadway debut I was a swing in Good Vibrations. I was put
Uh-huh.
on at half hour with no rehearsal, no
Whoa.
costume. I got like pushed on stage, and nobody was in the audience, nobody I knew. It was like a very anticlimactic, sort of anticlimactic in the way that you hope it is, but very stressful in the way you don't want it to be.
Right.
And now this was yours and Paul's Broadway debut, so this is the
Right.
story you're going to take. So all four of us sort of have a little unconventional Broadway debut story, which I think kind of makes me feel better in some
Yeah.
ways.
Well, I mean, COVID has affected two productions of mine now.
Mm.
When my wife and I wrote Coal Country at the Public Theater, we got shut down by COVID 8 days after getting these glorious reviews.
Mm.
And that was weird and hard. Unfortunately, we reopened after things calmed down a couple of years later, but it was really weird and hard. And this was weird and hard. And you know, we'll talk about the other thing later, but I had a thing happen to me this year that sort of
Yeah.
put it in perspective. And I was just like, as long as everybody's like, as long as nobody's on a ventilator or really, really, really sick, I
Right.
just immediately went to that place. And really, the hardest thing to deal with was my wife, because she had gotten
Yeah.
dressed up. She had
Yes.
bought this dress, and she's like, and I didn't get to show it to anybody. And I was like, I saw the dress.
Uh-huh.
It was
That's
great.
what I mean. Like, it was something so moving about seeing your friends and your family show up for
Yeah.
you in a way. Like, it doesn't always register when you're also dressed up and it's the party and
Yeah.
it's about you. It's like it kind of like became about them and their devotion to us and their
Sure.
support. And that was very sweet. And I ended the night with my roommates on a cuddle puddle on the bed. And, I said, like, I always knew the night would end this way because this
Uh-huh.
is, how I live. But I just was more grateful than ever that I had that system around me, and I had you all, and then I had my friends, and
Right
so
on.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
We've both spoken openly about health challenges that we've faced. Krysta, you had breast cancer, and I survived a brain aneurysm. Did those experiences impact your approach to your work?
I mean, short answer, yes, for sure. One thing though, it's what bonded you and I almost immediately. I think, so Jeremy and Paul and Kwame, our director, and basically everyone else involved has done this show before.
Mm-hmm.
They did it at the Young Vic. They shot a movie of it. They've been like very close, and they were very welcoming to us. But I think Erik and you were the first person I saw when we started rehearsal, like on that first meet and greet day. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like, let's get to know each other. We're the new kids. And then we ate lunch together on the first day. And it just sort of naturally came out that you had, you said kind of flippantly, I almost died last year. And I was like, I almost died. and, and it sort of immediately brought us to a point of like, okay, like, this is going to be, I think, the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Like,
Yeah.
that there was something these guys had something they could relate on, that they had been through something kind of, emotional and seminal for them. And we had gone through something, and that was going to somehow giving us a history that they already had, which was very cool. I'm curious to hear about your approach to work, and then I can talk about it, but you.
Well, I mean, I expected the experience that I had. I came out of my brain aneurysm having this ridiculous amount of love for all of humanity, and loving my friends and my enemies with equanimity, and having an appreciation, stopping and smelling the flowers. I take time with things now. I'm careful about what projects I choose to do, because I don't want to be in anything that's like clunky emotionally. I just want to be in like a loving environment, like we have in a collaboration. And mostly I was feeling, after getting cast, I was feeling a lot of, I got inspired by Amelia Clark, because she had 2 brain aneurysms, and I've told you this story before.
Yeah.
But she had 2 brain aneurysms, and then continued to do Game of Thrones. And I happened to see her in a play in London, and The Seagull, and she was just brilliant in it. And I talked to my agents after that, and I said, I think we can aim higher. If she can do it, I can do it, was kind of the experience. So I came into it with a lot of gratitude. And just not wanting to rock the boat with my own shit. I don't think I told Paul or Jeremy or even Kwame until we were a couple of weeks in.
Yeah.
And then it kind of came out sideways, and Paul was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, I haven't told you this story yet." But I mean, I expected that this feeling of gratitude and gratefulness and love for my friends and stuff would fade. But it's been almost a year now. I'll be celebrating my year anniversary here in February.
There's got to be some pun there. I'm sorry. Anniversary.
There is
Yeah,
anniversary. That's what we're calling it now.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, I expected the gratitude to fade, and it hasn't.
Yeah.
You know, that's been my experience. But I mean, like, were you open about, did you have to stop work? You had to stop working for a little bit, right?
Well, this was what was funny about it. And I'll just to piggyback on what you were saying, like, I don't think that it is a coincidence that then you made your Broadway debut this year. I mean, like, obviously you're a jack of so many trades. And so it wasn't like you weren't a dog on a bone trying to get that Broadway debut. It wasn't your only focus, but there is something about when, you know, you put your focus on gratitude and you're grateful to your body and your you know, your healing abilities and that you're capable of a lot of things, that just like stuff starts to provide itself for you in a way. And for me, I had a substantial career leading up to it that I felt that I was controlling myself. You know, I felt very much like I was shifting gear. Okay, I want to go this way. Let's make that happen. And I'm going to go this way. Let's make that happen. And I was tired and I was burnt out and I was, you know, all kinds of things. And in fact, when I was diagnosed, I was unemployed. I had a really tough year. I had finished a show. I got onto a pilot. I was fired from the pilot, which was devastating. Then like, it was all kind. I ended up like losing some other job, and then I was running out of money, and I turned 30 that year. And then it was 2 months after my 30th birthday. And if you would have taken like a snapshot on that day, I was unemployed. I was lonely. Didn't have any money. It was just like not a great year. I was traumatized from the bad television experience, and I'd gone through a breakup, and then I got cancer. And I was like, okay, well, that's not gonna help. I thought. And so I really decided, well, when I first got diagnosed, I didn't want to tell anybody. I was like, well, I have to work. And I had done that pilot earlier, and I'd gotten paid for the pilot. And this was the year of the SAG-AFTRA merger. And the pilot had decided to change from SAG to AFTRA. So all of that money that goes towards your health insurance was for AFTRA.
Wow.
And didn't qualify me for SAG. So I had gotten diagnosed in September and was going to lose my health insurance if I didn't work from December. And so I was about to like embark on a bad time, and this story got really long. I'm just going into the weeds. But I
think it's fine.
But what it did was go like, okay, I have to work, and I can't tell anybody because they'll see me as liability. They want to hire me. I wasn't going to have to do chemo at the time. So I was like taking any job that I could take and hiding it for a long time. And I realized I got the health insurance, God. And then it was the next year, and I was I was at a party. I had to start chemo. I was wearing a wig. Nobody had known about it. And I was at this party, and somebody like came up to me and they put their hand on my knee, and they were like, "Hey, I'm just checking in. How's your pilot season going?" And I was like, "My what?" Like, because everyone had known I had gone through like a tough time with it the year before. And I was like, my pilot season, I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking, like, just acting and all of that in general was so far away from what I was in the immediate like trenches of going through. And I went home that night and I was like, I have to tell people, because now I'm lying. Like now I can't actually relate to anybody in what I'm really going through. And
Well,
I'm not,
it's your truth. I
yeah,
mean,
I'm
it's
not
like,
forming genuine connection. I'm not genuinely like interacting with anybody. They don't really know what's going on. And that's when, and then I was going to do chemo. I thought I'm going to be bald. No one's going to want to hire me. And so I told my agents, I was like, I'm going to not work for the year. And I'm going to take that time off. I'm going to write a blog about my experience, just so kind of update people on where I'm at. But like, I don't see myself working. Immediately, I got offered a TV show where I was playing a cancer patient. They were like, it was a show about cancer. And they were like, we're looking for someone. They wrote me an arc. They let me shoot whenever I wasn't doing chemo, when I felt well. I would be bald on the show. They let me like do myself. I would get in the makeup chair and all these like gorgeous actresses were like putting on bald caps and getting like hollowed eyes. And they were like putting fake lashes on me because I was like, I had no hair whatsoever. And they just let me like own that exactly who I was. And that was so powerful.
Well, it's so empowering. I
so
mean,
empowering.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I would do like fake chemo on the show, and then I do real chemo the next day. And they were just like, it was the first time I could ask for what I needed and people would give it to me, where I didn't feel like I had to apologize for the things that I was doing. They were just like, whenever you need, whenever you can shoot, we'll work around you, whatever. Because they knew what was happening. And then my best friend Andy texted me and was like, hey, we're doing Spring Awakening in LA. The girl that played Ilsa dropped out. It's in ASL, so you have to learn sign language, but we can't teach someone sign language and Spring Awakening. So do you want to play this part? And this is a part I understudied in the original that I've always loved. And I was like, the character's supposed to be like 14 and I was 30. And I was like, it was like someone coming being like, do you want to play Annie again? I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like not thinking it would do anything, but he was like, yeah, we figured while you're like recovering from chemo, you can like learn ASL with your hands, And so I finished chemo one day, and I started rehearsals for it. And the show ended up going to Broadway and like becoming this huge, and I was bald in the show. They allowed me to like be myself and kind of weaved it into my storyline. And it taught me that like muscling your career is getting you the things you think you want, but not what you need. And you're not a liability. Ask for what you need and you'll get what you need. And it was the most complicated and interesting characters I had been able to play, because I had a depth now of understanding. And I had the same thing that you had, which is that euphoria. And I had all this anxiety, even in the euphoria, that like, I know that a year from now, I'll be crying about an audition, even though I know that it doesn't matter now. And to like bring that. And I have moments of, it going the other way, where I'm still very, single-minded in this career and think that it's the most important thing ever. And I get hurt and all of that, but I do have that thing to draw on. So anyway, long story short, it really it enhanced my career in a way that I could have never imagined, and not like in the way that it enhanced the way I approach my career and the way that people saw me as more formidable in a way. So I'm grateful for that.
Well, I'm grateful for you.
Same.
Yeah.
It's bud. We're here. And we're
here.
on Broadway.
We're still here and we're on Broadway.
Yeah. Okay, Krysta, you were performing Cinderella and Into the Woods on Broadway while rehearsing the collaboration. What was that like? Okay. I'm rushing through that because I know. Erik got to see me in the show. Him and Paul brought their children to come see me, which was so lovely, right in the middle of rehearsal. It was wild. It was double duty is like something you always you go into thinking like it's going to be hard, but like it'll be fine. And then you get in there and you're like, what in the world did I do? But Cinderella is such a huge, it was such a huge undertaking for me. It was learning so much. It was replacing. It was, the role is very taxing. It requires a lot of comedy and drama and physical comedy and, vocal stamina and all kinds of things. So when I started the collaboration, I have like a 7-minute scene in the show, and that's it. And it's a 2-hour play that they've already done before. And so it felt like I got to play hooky. Like I would come in and I'd be like, we were the kids smoking under the bleachers.
Yeah.
And then I would like go back to school. I'd be studying for SAT prep. And then I would like, come play hooky with you guys. And it was so fun. It just really was such a palate cleanser. And like, it's so fun to exercise new muscles. And then, you get into that other phase. Like I was telling you the other day, where like the first day of rehearsal, I actually feel really confident. And by day 4, I'm like, you're the worst actor ever. Get out of here. What are you doing? So,
I loved how Paul would used to tease you. Oh, Krysta, you finally decided to show up.
Yeah, exactly. Because I could only come to rehearsal for 3 days a week because I couldn't be there on 2 show days. So, it was fun. It really when I was deciding to even do both of the shows, I was so lucky to get both of these offers, and they collided. And I could have
such
taken
different parts too. I just want
Totally.
to point that out. I mean,
Yeah.
Cinderella and this character you're playing is like a staunch New Yorker who's
totally. Although I kind of gave Cinderella a little New Yorker too.
Oh, did you really? Yeah, I saw that in some of the physical comedy.
Yeah,
It was
a little bit of
amazing.
her just
My daughter was so impressed with you. Like after that, she started talking about singing and maybe dancing and wanting to do a big, like she's always asking if you're in the dressing room and we're hanging out and talking, because she always wants to talk to you because of that performance.
Well, I'm impressed by Sadie as well. She's an incredible young woman. But I had so much. It was so much fun, and like toward the end, it was really. Oh, I was saying, when I decided to take both of them, I realized that they were stronger together. These 2 parts were stronger together. These 2 shows were stronger together. The experience of both of them in my life was stronger together. And so when it would get very difficult, I would just say these 2 are stronger together, And so, but then it helped me say goodbye to Cinderella, which was very important to me, to have something else to move into and throw myself into that. So anyway, it was hard experience. And I moved at the same time.
And you moved. I was going to say, you are the unsinkable Krysta Rodriguez. I sank
a little bit, but I get people around me to keep me afloat.
Yeah. So, they're all there for each other.
Yeah. I'll ask you this question. Erik,
you will. Oh, okay.
In addition to being a busy character actor, you've written a number of plays, including The Exonerated with your wife, Jessica Blank. How do you balance performing and playwriting?
Well, that's a really interesting question. First of all, my wife organizes me.
Yes.
She organizes the calendar, and she makes sure that I'm in the place that I need to be at the time that I need to be there. But the second thing is really I've requisitioned time in my day for each thing. When my daughter goes off to school, I get up at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then my butt's in my chair by 9 o'clock, and I'm writing whatever I need to write. Probably till noon, and then I memorize lines, and then if there's a rehearsal that comes in there, I'm memorizing lines. I'm only writing from 8 to 10, and then I'm memorizing lines on the train on the way to rehearsal, and also I came into in order to balance the 2, I came into the collaboration fully off book. It was really, of course, then the script changed.
The script changed immediately, and you were like,
all that went away. I was like, what do I do? But I mean, I think the 2 things are both in service of storytelling, right? And we've talked about this. In one, like the collaboration, I'm a conduit for Anthony McCarten's words and a conduit for the energy of the other actors. It passes in me and out of me and back. We make these feedback loops with each other on stage and then repeat them the next night. So that's very beautiful. It's interpretive. And I like that a lot. And then, as a sort of overseeing storyteller, as a playwright and a screenwriter, I really love to give my friends jobs. So I love collaborating with my friends. And so when I have control over the subject matter and over the writing, I have a say in who gets cast. And I, like so many people that are my good friends, have ended up in our projects just because we've known them for a long time and feel like they deserve to play something different or something new. And that's one of the great joys of being a hyphenate.
Yeah. No, so you have so many projects you're working on right now. I
Hmm.
know that you've got movies, you've got musicals, you've got plays, and you're acting. Would you say that, similar to my double duty thing, like, do you find that those things need their own attention, or are they stronger together as well?
The stronger together thing really hit me when you said that, and I haven't thought about this very much, but I think being on the other side of the table as a writer director has really helped me understand what my role is as an actor and what my lane is. In my 20s, everybody's complicated in their 20s, and I was a complicated actor.
Yeah.
Nothing was simple, and
Yeah.
everything took a lot of work. And this thing you said about muscling things, I was always trying to cram square pegs into round holes rather than
Mhm.
just letting it flow. And being on the other side of the table and constructing the scene for people to act later made me realize how much work goes into a project before I even get there.
Yeah.
And that's from the designers, from
Yeah.
everybody. And so I think I approach work with a deeper respect and a deeper amount of compassion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when a director gets frustrated or an actor gets frustrated, or inevitably a designer gets frustrated or feels like their vision isn't being met or whatever, I just take that as that's part of the process, and I just accept it because everybody's committed. And
Right.
knowing that it's not about me has been a real gift.
Yes,
So
I agree. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I live now with like directors, composers, we kind of started a little artist commune that we all live in together. And to hear the phone calls, you're like, oh my gosh, all the things that are going into this by the time I show up and be like, I don't think she would wear that. It's just like, get out of here. Actors are the worst. They're the worst cog in the machine,
We can be.
so
We
many
can
times.
be. We can
But
be.
I do think, like, I do believe one of my mentors, actress Susan Egan, once said to me, I was having a tough time in a show, and she was like, I think roles come in your life when you need them, and you have to figure out what you're learning from them or what you're learning from the show. Like, how are you going to take what you gave to this character or to this show, to the next thing? And so I'm always looking for that now. And I just think that we are all highly collaborative people, which
Mhm.
is how we ended up in the collaboration.
Sure.
and
Sure.
like and that kept coming back, that word being in our psyche all the time, just the
Mhm.
title of that being on the front of our script, I think,
Mhm.
like, seeped itself into us being the right people for this job. The multi hyphenates are the people that know, like, what it takes to get to a place before we come in. I
Mhm.
think, like, that has led it to be a quite, and Kwame was so nurturing in that way as
Mhm.
well. So one of those, I don't know if you see these on like Instagram. They have those like word searches at the end of the year to like, what's your going to be your word for, like, what you see in the word search. Your first
Uh-huh.
3 words are going to be like what your year is going to be like. And I did one last year, and I wrote them down just to sort of see
Right
what they
on.
would be. And I put them on the top of my little like notes where I do my schedule. And I looked back at it, and one of the words was collaboration.
Whoa, are you serious?
Yeah.
That's not an accident.
No, for
That's not an
2022
accident for
was collaboration.
2022. Right
Yeah.
on.
And I was
Yeah,
like, I
that's a good
saw it
one.
again and I was like, oh my gosh. So I did them again this year just to see, and one of them was like, there was just like some weird, like, dance. I was like, okay, dance is the word I saw in this word
Hmm.
search. I don't even know if you're supposed to see dance in this word search. So we'll see what comes out of this year's word search, but collaboration was really
Well,
there.
I'd also add to that we are one of the most functional and supportive casts that I've
Yeah.
ever had the pleasure of working with. Paul and Jeremy and us, we have such a supportive, energetic positivity towards each other, and I'll say the word. I'd say a kind of love for each other.
Oh, sure.
That's not made up and fake and sort of just convenient and of the moment. I think we're all going to be friends for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and something that you said, people, if you come see the collaboration, please come see the collaboration. Erik and I have, what you might call like smaller roles, but they're pivotal to the show, or
You're
else neither of us
supporting.
would be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the first, you said this word, you said it's supporting in the truest sense of the word. And that really resonated with me, is that
Mm.
you think of supporting characters as being like, I don't know, like, in the mental picture in your mind is not that they're actually supporting. It's that they're, I don't know. I've never thought of them as actually being grounded and like a pillar to support. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that like this experience led us to really realize what a supporting character really meant. I mean, you asked me a question about, because we got to do the show with our understudy Matthew Griffin, the last two shows, you know, and then Jeremy came back and you said, was that different, you know, that scene? And I said, it was, but that scene is really just me being a channel for what whoever plays Basquiat needs in that scene. I don't even think of it as what did that work for me? It's like, did I work for them? You know, and that's a cool new, maybe, you know, obviously I feel that way in other shows, but I think this show has really lent itself for us to learn the merit in that and take that moving forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, tell us your funniest Paul Bettany, Jeremy Poe stories. Okay.
What do you got?
I don't know. Okay, you do.
I wrote them down.
Oh, good.
Well, I think it's not a funny story about Jeremy, but I think it was Jeremy who started this thing of saying, okay, fam, what's our intention tonight?
Yeah.
And we gather in a little circle in the stage, and it's deeply loving, and it's a moment where we all decide, depending on the size of the audience or what the energy of the crowd feels like or how we feel individually or what we've gone through during the day. It's when we decide what our intention as a cast is going to be for the show. Are we going to approach it with love? If it's a smaller audience that may not give us waves of feeling back and forth, as many waves, as big a waves as we're used to, you know, are we just going to tell the story? Are we gonna try to pick up the pace? Are we gonna, like it's this wonderful intention setting thing that happens between the four of us, and it's so organic and wonderful. That's the thing I love about Jeremy.
Yeah.
You know, but in terms of Bettany, I don't think anybody has lived until they've seen Paul Bettany dance to "Don't You Want Me, Baby" by the Humans.
Yes.
A lot of elbows, a lot of back and forth, deconstructing the problematic aspects of the song while he's going.
And a lot of pointing.
A lot of pointing.
Yeah. There's a live DJ at our show, just for context. There's a live DJ that starts the show and is an intermission. So we dance backstage before we get on stage.
Yeah.
So
what do you got?
Oh my God. I really can't. It's funny because I mean, Paul makes me laugh all the time, and I can't like pinpoint a specific like funny moment. Oh, this is kind of a funny moment. This makes me laugh a lot. There's a set of Polaroids that in our show that are very important to the show. They're very important. They're very important to the entire second act. Yeah, they're pivotal. And in fact, they're pivotal to me as well. Like they're the reason I come on stage one of the times. And the Polaroids, I somehow didn't end up in the bag that they needed to at the start of the show. And I don't really know how it happened because I wasn't on stage, but I don't know who noticed first that there were no Polaroids. I guess Jeremy must have, because Jeremy comes in and is like, yeah, I took some Polaroids, and he's like looking through his bag and he can't find them, I guess. So he kind of describes what the Polaroids would be. He kind of goes, you know, they're in here, whatever. And he moves on. And so then Paul is supposed to look at the Polaroids, but he like, he looked at them inside the bag, I guess. He like opened the bag to like see them. And then he goes, wow, it's Jean, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, the Polaroids are in the bag. Which is not a line. It was just like, it was as if, well, what we thought he was saying was, Jeremy, you didn't see them. They're in the bag.
Yeah.
Like you missed them. And he kind of said, the Polaroids are in the bag.
And you were backstage waiting for your entrance.
Going, okay, right. Polaroids are in the bag. Great. But I didn't even notice it. So then I come on stage and I'm like, the Polaroids, I need the Polaroids. And he's like, and Jeremy's staring at me, and we are like locked horns, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're going somewhere emotionally. All right, we're good. And I'm like on this road with him. And then I like look over and I'm like, oh, the Polaroids aren't there. That's why he can't give me the Polaroids. And so then I go, you know what, F you, whatever. And I like leave the stage, and I'm like going stage mind, and I'm like, there are no Polaroids. Like there's been, 20 minutes, 40 minutes of on stage time where we could have like figured, you could have told me. Nobody told me there were no Polaroids. I could have known that I could have changed the scene. Yeah. And they were like, well, Paul said the Polaroids are in the bag. So right. We just all thought they were in the bag. And so afterwards, I'm like, Paul, were the Polaroids in the bag? He's like, no. And I'm like, then why did you say that? He was like, I was letting everybody know that there were no Polaroids in the bag. And I was like, by saying the Polaroids are in the bag?
It was reverse psychology.
That was supposed to let all of us know that
He's
the
British.
Polaroids weren't in the bag? I guess what he was trying to say was like, he was trying to signal to the audience, I'm looking at the Polaroids that are in the bag.
Copy that.
Like, that's where the Polaroids are, in the bag. Saying like, guys, obviously the Polaroids aren't here, or I would take them out. I don't know. It was reverse psychology, but now we always say the Polaroids are in the bag. Means they're not in the bag.
Right. That's right.
So I guess that's a funny story for both of them.
Yeah.
Oh, we were just talking about
what's
this.
the best deal you ever got at the TKTS booth?
Thank you. We were just talking about this. When I first went to school, I first came to New York for college, you could get on the TDF website, and there would be tickets sometimes for $3 for shows. And it would be so exciting because it was the only way you could go see a show. So you would like wake up in the morning and go on the website and see what they were offering. And you would hope that, it'd be a show that you'd want. I can't remember what show exactly it was, but I remember getting to see some show for $3 and just feeling like, I'd won the lotto. But also just like walking by that TKTS booth and being like, what's on? What can we see? What are we going to get? Oh, I have a funny story, but you tell yours.
Well, my story is I probably helped you in line because I actually used to work at the TKTS booth. I worked as a line mover alonger, and also this was before the electronic signs were up. They had these plastic signs that they had to put up, and we had to change the titles of them depending on what show was coming in. So we would come out in the very cold weather early in the morning and put the new shows in and take the old shows out, so you could see the sort of the hustle of Broadway happening on these big plastic boards. And then we had to lift them up, and we would help people, and we would tell them what each of the shows was about, and help them along in the line, and
you're waiting in line,
needed anything. That's right.
Yeah, because you want to know, because you had to get your ticket right when you got to the front. You'd been waiting for so long, so you had to know what you wanted.
So we were art expediters. That's what we were doing. So that was so what my greatest experience at the TKTS booth was a paycheck.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had my friends had come, they'd waited in the big long line, and I was doing Good Vibrations at the time, and they got to the front and they got tickets for All Shook Up or something. They got tickets for some show that they were seeing. And as they had got the tickets in their hand, they turned around, they saw a text from me that's like, I'm going on in Good Vibrations. And so they were like, oh no, we had just gotten tickets for this thing, and we'd only gotten 3 of them, and we know that our other daughter would want to go. So they turn around and they're like, oh, you gave us tickets for All Shook Up. We asked for Good Vibrations. And they were like, oh, really? And they were like, yeah. And you gave us 3. We asked for 4. And the woman goes, what's going on? The first time they were willing to admit maybe they gave them the wrong ticket, but then when they needed the wrong.
But then there's this other thing.
She's like, I didn't make that many mistakes. What's going on? And they're like, her friend is in Good Vibrations, and she just told us she's going on, and they swapped the tickets for them.
Oh, that's
the
great.
thing, which you cannot get refunds.
That's right. That's right.
And so it was a very kind thing that the TKTS booth did, so that my friends could come see me go on. I
was deeply in love with the TKTS booth ticket sellers. I just love them. Everybody's a little tough. Some of them were from Long Island, all the cool kids.
Yeah. Anyway.
Last
question. Oh gosh.
Okay.
Last question. Be each other's casting directors. What role would you put the other in? Now, you said you've thought about this, and I have not thought about this, so I'm
I have
flying blind here.
you can say anything you want and I won't be hurt.
Okay.
But I've thought a lot about this. I would love, and I might be writing something like this, so maybe I'll get to hire you. But I would love to see you do a comedic film noir,
Ooh.
like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, like the
Yeah.
Steve Martin movie, or Johnny Dangerously. I would love
Uh-huh.
you to see it. I would love to see you do a comedic take on a film noir. I think you'd make a great, woman with a gun and a past.
Yes.
So that's what
I
I would.
love
And
all
then,
those movies, the pre-production code noir
sure,
movies.
totally,
Those
yeah.
women were incredible. Like
They
we
were
we still don't have female
brassy and
characters that cool, because we
no,
did in the
no,
20s.
we're just trying to
And
copy it.
you were
Other
just
than
trying to
that,
copy.
I would cast you. I just started watching a new show, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, and I would cast you in a genre show.
Okay. All right.
If I could.
Anybody famous you think I should play?
Well, you did Liza already. Let me
Mm-hmm.
think. Let me think. I think you've got I think you've got like kind of like a Joan Jett in you, don't you?
Yeah,
Do you ever get
totally.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get Pat Benatar.
A Pat Benatar, totally.
Yeah,
Shadows of the Night. I mean, come
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Yeah. Those like a cool rock and roll person, I think would be a
yeah.
super a
Well,
super
I
great
would
part
like
for
to see,
you.
I didn't get to see you play Lester Banks. So
Mm.
if there was any, time machine, I would cast you in that to see that again. Um, I want to see you play like a Russian, like Dostoevsky or something. I want some like epic, like some really big epic story where you're doing like you're playing some Chekhovian, like or something like that. I want to see you in a beard, and I want
Yes.
to see you like angsty over like a quill pen or something. That's what I want to see.
I
Yeah.
love that. I'm
But
actually Chekhov is the one thing that I really lock into. Chekhov and Beckett. I'm not a Shakespeare guy. I don't lock into Shakespeare
yeah.
as well as those, but Chekhov and Beckett and Sam Shepard, I really lock
Well,
into the guys with
Chekhov,
pauses.
they're the New Yorkers of those classical texts,
Yeah.
like they are the wry humor.
Yeah.
And I think like we both subscribe to that. But yeah, I mean, you're also very funny and have like a
Well, thank
handle
you.
on comedy. So I think like that's why I want it to be like tragically funny, just like everything's going, everything is so upsetting, and that would be very funny, I think,
And
to
maybe
see.
if either of these things happens, you and I will actually get to act together next time.
Right,
We
I
don't
know
get to
we
do
don't
that
actually
yet.
have a scene together in the collaboration.
It's gonna happen. We're gonna
Yeah,
make one of these things happen.
exactly, exactly. All right,
I
okay.
have to thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
TDF audience, for being here, and
Yes,
we're so appreciative, and thanks for having us.
yes, thank you so much. Come see the collaboration at the Samuel Friedman Theater and on 47th Street. We're here through February 5th. And support TDF. They're an incredible organization that does amazing things. So thanks.
Bye.